Now, the South African Youth Council has condemned the resignation of the Postbank Board of Directors. The council says the timing is bad as many disadvantaged citizens have been left without their much-needed grants. Postbank has failed to pay recipients for almost 2 weeks now due to a glitch in the system. I'm now joined in studio by Kanakana Mudzanani. He's the founding president of the South African Youth Economic. Thank you very much for your time here on eNCA. Let's just start with the resignation of the board. It was a mass walkout, right? It's about 5 non-executive members the day before that briefing that we saw last week by the cabinet ministers. And then the next day you find out from the communications minister that, no, in fact, I fired them. So to me, it looks like there's a lot of politics at play while the people on the grassroots are suffering.
Good afternoon, Maseko, and good afternoon to your viewers as well, and thank you so much for inviting us. I think what you've just outlined is a clear depiction from the board that walk out, that they were unable to respect their executive authority, and they were also unable to work or rather take instructions from their executive authority. And I further think that Minister Gungubele perhaps was warranted in being hostile towards them, because you cannot go for about 2 weeks without paying over 160,000 social grant recipients their much needed grant, you know. So we do think that as the South African Youth Economic Council that this mass walkout that was staged by this board members is unpatriotic, and also the timing of it is very much telling about their characteristics, that they would rather prioritize their professional interest over state interest, because if you leave a vulnerable group of society without their much needed grant on the basis that staying in the board of the Postbank is going to do more harm to your professional career, that actually tells a lot about you. So as a council, we do think that the timing was a bit off. However, perhaps this could be good riddance, and we expect that the Postbank as well as the minister are going to move with agency and pace to make sure that the appropriate board members are appointed and the Postbank moves ahead with swift to execute its mandate of establishing a fully state-owned bank.
What do you make of their statement that they released last week, Wednesday, I believe? Basically, actually, it was a leak of their resignation to the Minister of Communications, where they accuse him of also just being a person who was inapproachable, a person who spoke to them in a certain manner while they were trying to sort things out. What do you say about what they're explaining, led them to making this decision? Because, I mean, there's been a technical glitch before and they stayed.
I think what we should focus on is just making sure that the minister going forward has a much more professional relationship with the board that is going to appoint in place. But more than anything, as I indicated, Maseko, if I was also Minister Gungubele or Minister Zulu, and I'm sitting with over 160,000 South Africans that have not received their much needed grants, I am going to be hostile towards you as a board for failing to hold your executive into account and for failing to do a proper oversight. But I do think that going forward, we do not need these things happening. We want South Africans who are from a vulnerable position to at least receive their much needed grants on time. And we firmly believe that, you know, the next board that is going to be entrusted with this position must be young and dynamic, and they must also be patriotic in their nature, and more than anything, they must be geared up to ensure that they approach the Reserve Bank, expedite the process of acquiring the banking license for the Postbank, because this board that has just left had promised us when they came into their positions of power that they're going to make sure that the Postbank has a banking license in no time. But even now, as they leave, the Postbank has not attained that banking license. So more than anything, their tenure at the Postbank is characterized, or it's not short of failure, in my own opinion, of unpatriotism, and more than anything, of just a group of individuals who prioritize their professional interest over those of the state.
All right, tell me about the appointment of Kaile Tungema as an administrator after this mass walkout, right? Well, you know, at the same time, the scrutiny around his appointment is not really him, the man himself. It's about the minister, apparently it's about the minister getting an administrator. There's law that he says he followed to get an administrator, besides the fact that there was one board member, I think the 7th one, who was asking why she must leave. Then came that KPMG report from 2018, which apparently preceded the board that has just walked out. But people are saying, are you sure you were supposed to go to an administrator? Did the law, trigger that? Did you have to go straight to getting an administrator? What do you make of that?
So there's two things here, Maseko, right? You're correct in saying there is a KPMG forensic report, right? That basically indicates the fact that within the Postbank, there are service providers who are being paid without proper procurement processes being followed, right? Even though the report precedes these guys being appointed into the board, they had the chance to fix it, and there seems as if there is a continuation of that, right? So if I was a minister and there's this damning allegation which speaks to corruption, and you as a board member have not taken any action towards it, I would not keep you there as well. And even though
it's just funny, the timing of the minister, because remember, he takes over the department from another minister of communication who now is in the presidency.
Correct.
So it's quite telling, the timing on both ends, if you had to admit.
No, I have to admit that it is indeed both telling, but we cannot dismiss the fact that the minister obviously saw an opportunity to appoint a board that would probably respect his executive authority, a board he would be able to work with, and more than anything, for him, this board prioritized its professional interest and not state interest. So he needs a board that is much more aligned to his vision, and that will make sure that the Postbank functions to the interest of South Africans and the people of this country. So I do think that the appointment of Mr. Ngema as an administrator is indeed a contingency measure in the interim. And as we move forward, I do hope that the minister is going to make sure that young people are given expression in his board appointment, and more than anything, a capable group of board members that have the capacity, have the experience, are rewarded with the opportunity to serve in this patriotic role. And we firmly believe that it's high time we have a Postbank that is going to ensure that vulnerable groups of society can have access to loans, can have access to financial support from the government without necessarily going through the same traditional barriers of entry that have deprived us from our commercial banks. So I do think that this board must be patriotic in its nature, and it must understand that we have to work with the executive authority, not because we respect it, but because we respect South Africans who need their much needed grants on time. So as the South African Youth Economic Council, we do think that the minister must make sure, working with the SASA, the respective DGs of both social development and digital technologies, to make sure that this crisis does not happen going forward. South Africans can no longer afford this, and we need to make sure that the Postbank is a state-owned bank.
Just lastly and very quickly, how urgent is it that a board is appointed, and what do you think should happen in appointing the board? Should it be what the JSC does with making it a public interview process when it comes to the Postbank, because of how close it is to paying the poor? Yes, we have an administrator, but how important is it and how urgent is it to just have a board?
It is quite urgent that we have a board, but the agency of it must not make us overlook the regulations that guide the minister in how he should appoint the board, right? You must open up the opportunity to the public. You must make sure that the best of the best are selected, but through a process which is legal, fair, and impartial. But more than anything, I think appointing Mr. Ngema as an administrator is to make sure that we allow the due process to unfold, but at the same time, there is a sense of stability within the Postbank. Ourselves as the South African Youth Economic Council do firmly believe that there's quite a lot of young professionals who are already serving in strategic boards of strategic private entities that the minister must obviously give an ear to, and he must make sure that his board is reflective and it's a generational mix of some sort.
All right. Thank you very much for coming into studio and for speaking to us about this very important topic. That was Kanakana Mudzanani. He's the founding president of South African Youth Economic Hub.